Enough self-righteousness. Try freedom. Authenticity Radio.
I'm Nicki Minaj, and this
is Authenticity Radio.
Authenticity Radio with Slade Suter.
Let's go to the beach, eat, let's go get a wave. They say what they gonna say. Have a drink, clink, found a Bud Light. Bad like me, it's hard to come by. The Patron, let's go get it down. The sound, yes, I'm in the zone. Is it 2, 3? Leave a good tip. I'ma blow all my money and don't give up.
And now, your host, who has the hospitality of a fat and jolly innkeeper, Slade Suter.
Here's a little song I wrote. You might want to sing it note for note. Don't worry. Be happy.
Thank you very much, and welcome to today's program. This is Slade Suter.
When you worry, you make it double. Don't worry. Be happy. Don't worry. Be happy now.
Today I am broadcasting from the Authenticity Radio Studios.
Be happy.
And I have the privilege to announce that Ellen Stockdale Wolfe has joined me today. Now let me tell you a little bit about Ellen. Ellen has been diagnosed with Asperger's and bipolar. And she is here today to share with us a little bit about who she is and her journey with our listening audience. So, Ellen, welcome to Authenticity Radio.
Well, thank you, Slade, and thank you for having me.
It is wonderful to have you, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. So, Ellen, you have Asperger's, is that correct?
Yes.
And you also have bipolar, or you're diagnosed with bipolar.
Right, bipolar disorder, right.
And it's really great of you to come out and to share some of the insights of what it's like to have Asperger's and what it's like to have bipolar.
Okay, good. I hope I can. Well, should I start with bipolar?
Let's start with Asperger's. Go ahead and tell me what is Asperger's?
Asperger's syndrome is a developmental disorder. It's on the autism spectrum, and it's considered less severe than autism.
So it's actually related to autism then?
It's on the autism spectrum. It's one end of the spectrum.
Okay.
And typically, people with Asperger's or Aspies, as they're nicely called, are intelligent, but they have social deficits. Severe social deficits.
So one of those things is kind of like social interaction. For example, being on the radio.
Being on the radio is probably a lot better than being on TV. For people with Asperger's, eye contact, like with autistic children or adults, eye contact is problematic, and being touched is problematic. Social interaction is problematic.
Nonverbal communication can get kind of confusing.
Yes, and Aspies have trouble picking up social cues. They're sort of in the dark when it comes to picking up what certain facial expressions mean, and they may be unobservant, or they may be hypervigilant, as I am, for various reasons, but they don't know how to interpret what they see.
Okay.
On people's faces.
When were you diagnosed with Asperger's?
I wasn't officially diagnosed until I was 61, but I knew that Donna Williams has written several books on. She's autistic. She's the more severe form on the autistic spectrum disorder, and she's written several books. I knew from reading her books that I had what I called secondary autism, because at the time when I was reading these books, Asperger's syndrome wasn't really known in the United States. Or, I think it was known first in Europe, but the United States was way behind. So I didn't. I had been diagnosed bipolar, but I had not been diagnosed Asperger's as well, and so I didn't get diagnosed until age 61, which in some ways was good because it forced me to really fight because I was treated as if I was normal. So I really had to fight. But on the other hand, the fight takes its toll on you, and I'd got none of the aids or care that, people who are known to have Asperger's do get nowadays. They're behind the times.
So you're kind of like a pioneer in some ways, aren't you?
Well, not really. There are a lot of pioneers before me. A later pioneer.
Oh, yeah, there you go. A later pioneer. That works for me.
I didn't get diagnosed. I went for a diagnosis because I wanted to know for myself. And from there, I was able to diagnose my husband with some degree of certainty that he also has, even though he is a psychiatric social worker, so he's overcome a lot to do what he does. So the two of us sort of bumbled along into our relationship, and
well, that's the way all relationships, or at least good relationships, are. We kind of bumble,
Yeah, we're definitely bumbling.
Okay, so you mentioned that you had you were diagnosed with bipolar before.
Yeah, now bipolar disorder, it used to be known as manic depressive disorder, is a mood disorder, and it's a major Axis 1 mental illness. And most people, if not all bipolar people, are medicated with various medications. I'm taking a sort of cocktail of medications, among them antipsychotic medications, because bipolar people can become psychotic. Delusions and, impaired reality testing, and different world, really.
A different world. Okay.
Yeah, it was definitely a different world. I was delusional and I was psychotic, so it was definitely a different world I lived in. But I did maintain a job during that whole time until age 60, and then I could no longer hold it together. Mm-hmm. Rather, it was age 50. Sorry.
Well, I'm still having a hard time holding it together at 40. So you're. So, and when were you diagnosed with bipolar?
Well, bipolar, things came to a big crash at age 28, and various incidents, all involving relationships, contributed to that crash, and I could no longer function. I could no longer get out of bed. I could no longer go to work, and I did go to work, but I got emergency psychiatric help, and I was put on medication right away because I was told that either I get medication or I go to the hospital, and I didn't want to go to the hospital, so I chose medication. And there was a period of testing various medications, and there was a period, I wasn't diagnosed right away when I went to therapy, but after a while, the diagnosis came clear. Bipolar people are hard to diagnose because if you see them in one state, you can't really tell. You may see them when they're manic and everything is fine, according to them, and you don't see the depressed side and you don't see the alternation of moods. So it may take some time to get a diagnosis.
So you might need help of loved ones or people that know you very well to work with you or to work with your doctor.
Yeah, I was alone, so there was really no help. I didn't want my family to know at the time, so it took a little longer for my diagnosis to come. But
and here's a question. How did you feel when you were finally diagnosed with bipolar?
It was a surprise. It was hard to believe. I didn't even know I was depressed, and in fact, I was suicidal, and I still didn't know I was depressed. It's a disorder of major denial because you alternate between moods, so you think everything's fine one moment, and there's nothing wrong with you. So it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. Take it in and believe that something really is wrong.
So it was kind of like a shock for you at first, then.
Yeah, it was a shock. And my family was very anti-therapy, so I had a lot of things to overcome to get to the place of getting help. But by the time I had the breakdown, there was no question that I needed help. So then I was open to it, which helped.
Well, good for you.
Well, thank you.
How did you find support when you were diagnosed with manic depressive, as manic depressive?
People from work were actually very supportive in many ways. My family, I didn't really tell them until much later. And I had one very good friend who was extremely supportive. I had one or two good friends who were very supportive. And then when I met my husband, of course, he was a tremendous support. He's been the biggest supporter of my whole life. But
wow, well, that's a nice.
And the therapist, being on medication really helps also. And the therapist was able to work with me very well, except for the delusions. We had some conflicts over that. People don't like to give up their delusions.
Now you mentioned your husband is a therapist as well.
Yes, he's a clinical social worker, and he works with the poor mentally ill who have no one to care for them. And he works in a program affiliated with the hospital in the Bronx in New York City.
And you saw him and it was love at first sight?
Not quite, but almost. As soon as I heard him talk, which he didn't talk in the beginning, as I say, he's pretty Asperger's himself, so he didn't talk in the beginning, but once he did talk, then it was pretty much love at first sight.
You have many issues that come up with every couple that is learning to live together.
Yeah.
And then you have the extra on top of that that has to deal with going through and dealing with and learning how to communicate while having Asperger's, which may be an interesting, very nice way to practice with each other.
Yes.
Okay, well, look at me now.
Yes.
What do you think it would be good for the general public to know about bipolar?
Well, there's such a prejudice against mentally ill people. I wish that people would, and they're displayed so poorly in the media, generally speaking. I wish that people would know that bipolar people are able to contribute to society and to love and to have families. Generally, they're pretty creative, and you find a lot of actors and artists and etc., writers who are bipolar. I know there's some show here, I think I can't remember the name, that displays someone who's bipolar supposedly, and it's a very negative aspect, and generally speaking, people have very negative pictures of people who are mentally ill, and
well, I think people are afraid of what they don't know.
Yes.
So you see somebody labeled, and I use the word labeled, with bipolar. Well, they kind of are put into a box, aren't they?
Yes.
With expectations, and you kind of want to break that, don't you?
Yes, and the same with Asperger's. If someone who is not making eye contact with you or is very aloof, it may not be snobbishness, it may not be, not wanting to be in rapport with you, but it may be an inability to do so, or a misunderstanding. So I'd like people to know that Asperger's people can love as well and have deep feelings frequently, but don't know how to express them or cannot express them, except in certain ways, and they shouldn't be dismissed as cold, heartless people.
So you're asking people to please do not judge.
Yes.
What's a typical a day like for you?
Well, when I was working a typical day, when I was deep in the throes of mental illness and before I was properly medicated and everything, going to work was very difficult. Mornings were extremely difficult, and they still are. I'm now on disability for 10 years, so I no longer go to work, but I have a blog, and I do photography. As I say, I write and do photography. So that more or less takes the pressure off going to work and all the social contact. that's involved in a job. I worked in a library, which people may think doesn't involve social contact, but it does. And it was very difficult in the mornings. And when I was psychotic, I was thinking that the TV was talking to me and giving me messages, and people in the street were giving me messages. And this is on the way to work. This is how I started my day, that people were giving me messages, orders about how I should behave, or criticisms about how I was behaving. So, and then at work there was a whole other set of so-called teachers teaching me things, and I don't know how I did my work, to tell you the truth. I was a cataloger.
Well, you did.
I was a cataloger. So I didn't have
You were very concentrated, though.
I was very concentrated, but I was in a different world completely. I'm switching back and forth between reality and my world. I don't know how I did it, but somehow it worked. I just kept quiet a lot. In fact, there was a period where I didn't talk much at all.
I'm happy that that's changed.
Now it's just trying to plan the day and create a balance between doing housework and creative work, tending to my husband, and things that need tending to, in everyday life.
Okay, and so you mentioned that you have a blog, and you mentioned that you write, and I would like to give you the opportunity to share with people your photography and the book that you have written. So could you please tell us what is your blog, and is your photography on your blog?
Some of it. My art, some of it is up on my blog, which is at Stockdale, Stockdale, Wolfe, WOLFE, all one word, .com. And on there is there's a portion, the introductory portion, that introduces my book, which is called Eye Locks and Other Fearsome Things: Learning to Love as a Bipolar Aspie.
Wow, well that's a title straightforward, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not lesson plans. It's narrative nonfiction, and it's my story of how I found love finally after many aborted relationships, and after much therapy. And it's written from diaries that I wrote at the time, so it's a very accurate portrait of psychosis and being Asperger's and being bipolar, because it tells it as it happened.
I would imagine that there's people who are listening to you, and they may either have something themselves or know somebody who has symptoms. And what advice would you give to people who think that they may be bipolar, or think that they may have Asperger's, or somebody who that they love?
I would say first and foremost, get therapy. Find a therapist, and find a therapist that seems to be sympathetic. You may have to shop around, because every therapist is not going to click with you. For bipolar people, I think medication is a must, and sticking to a regime of medication is also a must, because you're going to feel better on medication. You're going to think you don't need it, but you do need it. And I have tried to get off it, but then I wound up in big trouble. And this is always the case with bipolar people. Then when they get off the medications, or I would say, 95% of the cases, get off the medication and you're back in trouble again, or wind up in hospital, or wind up not being able to cope. And with Asperger's, I would say to be yourself, and not to feel inferior because you're different, but not to feel superior either. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and I think for both cases, meditation, a good sleep regime, good diet, protein in the diet is good, staying away from alcohol and other substances is good, physical activity, and getting enough sleep. All of these things are very, very more important than for the average population for people who have bipolar or Asperger's.
It sounds like balance.
Yeah, you really need a lot of balance. And I think I do Reiki, and I'm thinking of learning Qigong. Any of those kind of things will help you. And for those who have somebody who they think is bipolar or who is bipolar, if they're in their family.
How do you approach somebody that you might think that they do have bipolar?
Well, that's a good question, because there's so much in denial that you might point out variations in their behavior, like, for example, if they're staying up until 4 a.m. all the time and not getting enough sleep and spending a lot of money, spiraling out of control, it's going to be very hard to get through to them when they're manic. You might have to wait until they're depressed, until they crash, and then they may be more open to help. And then you can point out the variations in their behavior. Well, last month you were such and such, you were, on top of the world, you were running around, having fun, dancing, singing. You might point out the discrepancy in their behavior when they're depressed. I think probably when they're depressed is the time to get them.
Oh, so they'd be more receptive, in your opinion?
Yes, they might be more receptive. It's a disease of denial. It's really a disease of denial because I don't know why, but it's very hard. Well, it's very hard for anybody to see themselves, but it's very hard for someone bipolar to. As I said, I didn't even know I was depressed, but when it was pointed out to me in therapy, and pointed out to me that I was afraid of love, and pointed out to me that perhaps a diet of orange juice and cheese was not really good, and that some of my ideas were delusional. Even that, I have to say that I really didn't believe the therapist. It took a long time. It takes time. But when you're depressed, you want help because you're feeling so badly. So that may be the time to get them.
So try to reach out, especially when they're going through a depressed state.
Yes.
They may be more receptive to receive you and to listen to you.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, and how about Asperger's? If we know somebody that is showing signs of Asperger's, and how would we approach somebody like this?
No, I think that Asperger's people already feel different, so they're maybe easier to approach, but if you point out, say, avoidance of eye contact, or say, you might approach them by saying that they need help with social interaction, or they're afraid to find out get them to speak about their fears of love, or why they're avoiding eye contact, and say that this, or why they misread cues, or why they feel different, or why they feel left out. A lot of Asperger's people feel left out, and they want to join them but don't know how. So that's a good way to go through that avenue to help them if they want to relate more to people but don't know how, to say that perhaps they can help them in, I don't know, with a therapy or a program, help them so that they can interact with people and have friends. A lot of Asperger's people feel they have no friends, and they feel different. They feel something's wrong with them, but they don't know what.
And so kind of like into building confidence with the person too, because like it's like being in front of people. It's a confidence thing. It's taken me a while to get through. Okay, Ellen, you're familiar with the yin yang circle?
Yes.
Okay, this symbol of balance. All right.
Yes.
Now we've been talking a lot about the problems that comes with bipolar and Asperger's. Now, what advantages, what gifts do you find? For example, let's start with bipolar. What gifts do you find there?
Okay, well, bipolar, I think the gifts are creativity during the manic phase and sensitivity to other people's problems during the depressed phase. The creativity is sometimes over the top when you're manic, but if you can channel it, it's very productive. And people who are bipolar are very productive. Winston Churchill was bipolar. Virginia Woolf was bipolar. Many of the artists and writers were bipolar and made major contributions. And during the depressed cycle, as long as they're not suicidally depressed, bipolar people can be more empathetic to people who are going through problems because they will feel deeply.
Okay, so there's a heightened creativity in the manic phase, and there's a heightened sense of empathy in the depressed phase.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
As long as each phase is not too extreme.
Well, that makes it seems to make sense to me.
Yes.
And then how about Asperger's? What gifts do you see that you have with Asperger's?
Well, Asperger's people are also generally tend to be very creative and very intelligent. A lot of them work in computers and computer science because it's working with machines. A lot of people with Asperger's make major contributions to society. I mean, they said that Einstein was Asperger's, so they see things in different ways. It's another form of creativity. So
between Churchill and Einstein, you're in good company.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, and then here's a question. What advice would you have for people that are afraid?
With Asperger's people, I would say don't overwhelm them with emotional gushiness or physical contact or eye contact. Don't demand. I've had people say, "Look at me in the eyes." This is really it's a jolt to the system because I'm not looking at them for a reason because I cannot talk and look at them at the same time. So don't
overwhelm them.
Yeah, don't overwhelm them because that really makes things all much worse and brings out all the symptoms.
How did you say that? Emotional, what was that?
Emotional gushing, yeah.
I love it. That's fun. Okay. So that's great advice. And what about bipolar?
I think bipolar people, let me see, maybe just approach them in a very calm and empathetic way. It depends whether they're manic or depressed. I mean, if they're manic, you might want to try and calm them down somehow. Be grounding for them. If they're depressed, you might want to be empathetic and say, for example, this must be very hard for you or whatever, if they're going through a very bad time.
So reach out with empathy.
Yes.
In a depressed state.
Yeah.
And in a manic state, just be calm.
Calming. Yes. Or ask them to slow down. They're going too fast for you or whatever. In a nice way, of course.
Ellen Stockdale Wolfe, thank you so much for being so brave and coming out in front of so many people today. I know that this has probably not been easy for you.
Well, you've made it easier, and I wanted to thank you. I think that investigating topics like this, like mental illness that other people want to avoid, it's a really good thing to do. Authenticity Radio is doing a really good thing, and I think it's a very giving thing to do, and I appreciate the interest in, these syndromes that I happen to have, but in general.
Thank you, Ellen. It's my pleasure to bring this out because for me, anything that has to do with authenticity is deserving to be covered. And you, in my opinion, are as authentic as they get.
Well, thank you very much. I read your book, and that means a lot to me.
Hey.
But I think that the same could be said for you. So.
Well, thank you very much. And speaking about the book, how do our listeners get a hold of your book? Where can they purchase it?
They can get it on Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com, iTunes, Apple, and Smashwords.com. But if they go to my blog, all of that, you can just click on those sites on you'll see in the introductory part of the blog, it says how to purchase the book if you're interested.
So listeners, if you are interested in purchasing Ellen Stockdale Wolfe's wonderful book, and what is the name again?
Eye Locks and Other Fearsome Things, Learning to Love as a Bipolar Aspie. And I just want to emphasize, it's not lesson plans, it's not a school book, it's really narrative nonfiction. So by reading it, you will get a good insight of what it's like to live with bipolar and Asperger's. Hopefully it will help people. That was my desire anyhow.
Well, there you go. It's a helpful book. And Ellen, do you have a message that you would like to deliver to humanity?
Well, I think the most important thing is love. And that's what I sought after all my life, and that's what got me to work on myself when I did find out all these things were wrong with me. I did it because I wanted to find love. And I think love is the most important thing and the most healing thing in the world.
Love is the most important thing, by Ellen Stockdale Wolfe. Thank you again for joining us on Authenticity Radio.
Thank you, Slade.
This is Slade Suter. Until next time, be authentic, be true, and be free.
Be happy. Look at me, I'm happy. Don't worry. Be happy. Hey, I give you my phone number. When you're worried, call me. I'll make you happy.
Authenticity Radio.
It has to be authentic. I should be able to feel it.
Real people and real authentic talk. Conflict is a choice you know.
Whoa, watch it. Sorry.
In order to gain a new perspective and how to resolve conflict in your organization, business, or family, go to AuthenticityRadio.com. All right, enough.
Come on! This is Authenticity Radio.
Authenticity Radio with Slade Suter.